We are live, folks. Thank you for joining the Substack Live. I'm really excited about this one today because someone I consider both a friend and a moral mentor, Charlie Sykes, is with me today. And you know Charlie of MSNBC fame and as the former editor at large at The Bulwark, longtime writer and commentator, and I would dare say philosopher of this turbulent Trump era. So, Charlie, thank you for taking the time today.
Well, thank you. I don't know if I can live up to the philosopher, but I do want to say that this is such a special event that I am violating my usual no hat rule. But I figured for the holiday weekend, the rejecting kings since 1776 seemed appropriate. So I'm sort of unveiling it for this live stream.
And look at that, and in comfort colors. I don't know who makes it, and this is not a paid advertisement, but that's a great hat.
Yeah.
Charlie, I wanted to kick us off today by asking you a question, not just for the benefit of listeners, but also for myself. I'm curious what you make of the news of the day, and nothing is more obvious in the news of the day than it seems like the world's richest man is back at it, brawling with the president of the United States. What should we make of this? Flash in the pan, or is there something more serious going on?
Well, first of all, I mean, talk about a sort of Greek tragic Shakespearean drama all rolled into one with watching these two guys go from the world's biggest, most beautiful bromance to where they are right now. There was that brief attempt at a rapprochement after Musk backed off and apologized for posting the stuff about the Epstein files, but it's on again, and there's no question about it. They're escalating. If Musk is serious, and here's the question: is how much staying power does Elon Musk have? Because right now he's at least threatening to fire real political bullets, by which I mean that he's saying he's going to help primary members of the House who vote for the big beautiful bill. He is going to bankroll people who defy Donald Trump, and that does change the formula a little bit because remember, like about 5 minutes ago, Elon Musk was Donald Trump's hammer, right? That if you defied Donald Trump, Elon Musk was going to come into your district or your state and he was going to annihilate you. Well, now he switched sides in that formula. So the question is, how serious is he? What's his staying power? Um, it's interesting, and this seems very relevant talking to you about this, that Trump's first inevitable instinct was to threaten Elon Musk and to threaten his businesses. And I think we have to assume that he's going to follow through. So the question is, who wins in a fight between the world's richest man and the world's most powerful man? My guess is that Trump has the ability to make Musk less rich. I'm not sure at this point that Elon Musk has the power to make Donald Trump less powerful. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, very selfishly, Charlie, one of the reasons I'm watching this one closely is because I suspect if Elon stays on this path, Donald Trump will do to him what he's tried to do to people like me and Chris Krebs and institutions like Harvard and law firms. He'll try to undertake retributive and unconstitutional actions to punish Elon Musk. And why do I say I am looking at that selfishly? Well, because Elon's recourse would be then to sue the administration in spectacular fashion to challenge those potential orders. And I could imagine him going very hard against the administration. And perhaps the silver lining is then setting some very serious legal precedent that makes it harder for the Trump administration to weaponize the federal government. Now, you can love Elon Musk or hate Elon Musk and still look at that potential outcome as a favorable one that constrains what seems to be an unconstrained executive. That's what I was looking at when this sprung up a couple of weeks ago. And of course, Elon backed down, and it seemed to outside observers like he was backing down, Charlie, because people told him, yeah, this is going to be really bad for your businesses. Like, you can be the world's richest man, but the federal government is still richer and more powerful. And then he seemed to back down, but now he's back at it. So I don't know. And already Donald Trump has made some of those threats. I think he said Doge is a monster that could eat Elon up, and that they would go after these contracts.
No, and I think you assume that he's going to do that. So what we're going the big question is, does Elon Musk have a glass jaw? I just don't know. He clearly doesn't have a real strong political instinct. He seemed actually surprised by some of the blowback that he's getting. The stock for Tesla, I think, was down today substantially. So we don't know. But to your point, Donald Trump is becoming increasingly emboldened that he can exact revenge against anyone. You're just on the list. The question is, at what point do the people with the major resources and constituencies fight back and begin to change the formula? We're starting to see some of that with the law firms. Other cases have been mixed. What I'm thinking, sort of longer term, is how stable Donald Trump's relationship is with, say, Silicon Valley. When people begin to realize that this man is actually a menace, that he's not a reliable ally, he has no loyalty, and he is capable of using the full power of the federal government to come after private individuals and private businesses. Now, I just parenthetically, how how utterly appalled anyone who considered themselves a free market conservative, should be about the use of state power to go after and intimidate private businesses. Donald Trump has no qualms about that whatsoever. So what's the backlash going to be there, and what position will the courts take? And despite what happened with the Supreme Court last week, I tend to be more optimistic about how they will react, how the courts are reacting to the attack on the law firms and some of the abuse of executive power.
Well, you mentioned conservatives on paper should be appalled at that. I mean, you and I are both lifelong conservatives, Charlie. And if I take us back in time to, the Obama years, if Barack Obama had weaponized state power in this way to go after, Paul Ryan and John Boehner and Mitt Romney, we would be, lighting our boxer shorts on fire on the White House lawn. I mean, we would be self-immolating in protest over that. And yet those same conservatives, some of them are, many of them, the vast majority of the party are, watching this gleefully and not seeing a couple years in front of them that it is possible that a far left candidate could take the White House and then cite the precedent of what's been done to use these powers against them. That's what's so insidious about this.
It is totally insidious, and you're right to go back in time and forward in time. I don't think it's possible for the people watching us to realize how, what the reaction would have been had Joe Biden and or Barack Obama used the power of the federal government as aggressively to go after conservative colleges, conservative foundations. Now, there's sort of a mythology out there. Well, they went after the Tea Party. Nothing remotely similar to what's going on right now. The problem is they've been talking about tyranny for so long. When the actual thing comes along, it's kind of ironic, don't you think, that they don't recognize it? But the other point you're making, I think, is even more important. One of the reasons why in our political tradition, traditionally, there has been restraint and prudence has been because of the recognition that the other guy is going to get back into power. And if you create a precedent of abuse of that power, then it can be turned against you. And conservatives should have a much deeper sense. I mean, do you remember that T-shirt or that sign, that slogan? The government that's big enough to do everything for you is big enough to, take everything away from you. And so the entire philosophy of the rule of law, of checks and balances, of restraint, was that recognition that if you were in power and you blew over all of those restraints, then you would be absolutely defenseless if the other guy gets into power, turns around, and uses that against you. And actually, I think, Miles, a shocking lack of sense of the historic danger that's been created here. The fact that this could come back on them, and again, more ironic to be coming from the party that traditionally said that it was for restrained small government.
Well, anchor us in history, Charlie, because anyone who goes through any formal schooling in the United States reads about Joseph McCarthy and McCarthyism, but the moment that we are in absolutely makes McCarthyism look pedestrian. It makes it look juvenile. We are in an entirely different era altogether. I mean, there really is a full-fledged war on free speech, which I always have to caveat. It sounds so hyperbolic, and I would never have imagined myself saying that. I would not imagine writing about this every day now, but it's so all-consuming. Tell us, I mean, is that me hyperventilating, or do you really think that we are in just really uncharted territory with regard to those attacks on free speech?
We are, and let me make a contrarian take here, and then I want to get to your McCarthy point because I think it's very very important. And being from Wisconsin, it seems very very relevant as well. We are in facing a really almost unprecedented attack on free speech. I mean, we have had some dark moments in American history. We had dark moments, under Woodrow Wilson after World War One. We certainly had the McCarthy era. I think it would be we would be less vulnerable had many progressives on the left not bought into the idea that speech they didn't like was violence. You look at many of the books that were taken out of libraries in the before times, they were taken out from progressives who thought that they were, I don't know, insufficiently woke. I'm reading a biography of Mark Twain. Think about all the controversies about taking Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn out. So if we had been more consistent in our defense of free speech and free speech
Mhm.
values, we might be more vulnerable. But having said that, was my contrarian take for today's show. Um, the McCarthy era is really interesting to distinguish because Joe McCarthy was a United States senator. He was not the president of the United States. And while Eisenhower could have been more forceful, Eisenhower obviously was not a supporter of or a leader of McCarthyism. And also, you had other Republicans who were willing to stand up and take on Joe McCarthy. And the defining moment, which we've talked about before, for the fall of Joe McCarthy was when a Republican United States Senator from Maine, Margaret Chase Smith, stood up on the floor of the United States Senate and denounced him in the strongest possible terms. And that led to the United States Senate censuring him. Many Republicans went along and he was done. So you had a Republican Party that was willing to stand on principle and turn against a demagogue. We had a Republican Party once that was willing to stand up against a corrupt president, Richard Nixon, which we ought to really remember how remarkable it was and how hard it would be for Republicans to turn against Nixon, who had just won this massive landslide. I mean, you want to talk about a mandate that he won in 1972. And yet there was still in the Republican Party principled voices that were willing to say, we are not going along with the corruption. So you go back to the McCarthy era and you had pushback against this attack on free speech. You go into the 1970s and you had a Republican Party that was still able to push back against corruption. And think how far we've gone, how far we've fallen since then.
Well, it's actually very fitting that you said that, Charlie, because I think there is still one relatively unexplored lever to bring sanity back to the Republican Party. And I'm going to take everyone back in time a little more than 4 years into a phone call both Charlie and I were a part of. And I think it was Chatham House Rules. So I don't think I can name anyone else besides you and I that were on it. But this was just after the 2020 election. Donald Trump has lost. Joe Biden's been inaugurated. And a friend of mine and Charlie organized a gigantic Zoom call that was dozens and dozens of disaffected conservatives, Republicans who had not just grown weary of what happened during the Trump years, but we were all very freaked out that the party was going to continue going this direction. And so we do this big multi-hour Zoom call, all of these, some elected conservatives, some not, some pundits, to say, where do we go next? And where does the Republican Party go next? And one of our friends who organized that call did a virtual poll of those participants and basically said, should we create a faction within the Republican Party to try to reform it? Or should a group of us go off and create a third party and run quasi-conservative candidates in the primaries to make these MAGA Republicans lose their races and learn through electoral defeat. And I'll never forget that digital survey came back live, during our confidential Zoom meeting, and it was 50-50. 50% of that group said, screw it, let's go start a third party. And 50% said, no, I mean, let's work on a faction within the GOP. I bring this call up, Charlie, because as I'm watching the Elon Musk stuff play out, there is some, I think, naivete, extraordinary naivete in him talking about creating a third party and the America Party. And, I've been down the third party route, and it almost seems like one of the stages of grief. Adam Kinzinger felt the same way when he left, and Liz Cheney talked about starting a third party, and I teamed up with Andrew Yang for a while, and, you become very jaded about it. But all of that said, there still is this possibility of someone rich enough like Elon going and running candidates from the right in Republican primaries to swing the pendulum back, to oust some of these MAGA folks. I wonder what you make of that. Is that political fantasy, or do you think that this is something that might actually be brewing?
Well, I think it's largely political fantasy, and the problem in the sense in the sentence somebody rich, rich like Elon Musk who could do this. The like Elon Musk is I think is the deal breaker because Elon Musk is still Elon Musk, and with the sort of Nazi curious, weirdness of him. So I'm not sure it's going to come. I actually think that Elon Musk is about to find out how little celebrity and how little clout that he has. I think that he imagines that he has much more pull on the right than he does. I think he's going to see that with the vote on the big beautiful bill. But let me just say something at the moment, because you're asking me at a moment when I'm sort of going through. We go through the various stages of grief, watching the vote, for example, on the big beautiful bill, and realizing that there is not a single member of the United States Senate, not a single member of the House of Representatives that I would describe as a never Trump Republican. They are
Mhm.
all gone. There are no
Mhm.
Adam Kinzinger. There are no Liz Cheneys. There are, think about the people that voted to convict or impeach Donald Trump. I believe there's, one member of the House from California. You have Senator Cassidy, who's now, voting with them. But it's been a complete failure of this movement that you and I have been, associated with to, find some voice for who are the principled conservative moderate Republicans who reject Trumpism. They have all either been purged or
Mhm.
self-deported. And it's really an extraordinary moment. And I think that it's important to kind of look this in the face and go, okay, so never Trump was a thing. And where are we right now? What is left in the Republican Party for someone who would stand up against Donald Trump? Where are the Mitt Romneys? Where are the Paul Ryans? Now, Paul Ryan was not a never Trumper, but Paul Ryan never bought in totally. But
Mhm.
even those types are now, again, being driven out or figuring to hell with it. I don't want to be part of this anymore. So the whole project of creating an opposition within the Republican Party just appears to be in rubble,
Yeah.
ashes.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see it with the mood I'm in here. So then the question is, where do we go? I have described myself as politically homeless for 8 years. I have to say, I really feel politically homeless right now because I don't think that there's a viable third party right now. Um, Although I think there is a tremendous appetite, and you could show polls that that if somebody tapped into it, like a Mark Cuban, not a Elon Musk, but and said, aren't you sick of the two political parties? Wouldn't you like a party committed to getting shit done and moving the country ahead? I think there's a tremendous constituency, but in our binary politics, how do you get there? I don't know. That's not my area of expertise. And then, of course, you have the Democratic Party, which if it's going to stop Trump, needs to win elections. And I don't know what the role for, ex-conservative Republicans is going to be in all of that. There is a role. Some people have gone that way, but I think it still remains a question mark.
Well, and look, I wouldn't blame Democratic listeners and friends who are on here for rolling their eyes and saying, "Come on, guys, come over. The water's warm. Why don't you just become Democrats?" And the honest answer is is the Democratic Party doesn't align with me ideologically, except on this one extraordinary issue, which is preserving the fabric of our democracy. And that's a crucial area to have common cause. And there is, I think, Charlie, a lot of power in those politically homeless people. I still make the argument, as I've seen you make very articulately, that in 2020, it really helped put Joe Biden over the edge that so many of those disaffected conservatives joined him. And there are those people out there, but there doesn't seem to be a great way to channel that voting block. Although, I'll say, and I'd be interested in your perspective,
Yeah.
there's the Joe Walshes of the world. Joe left and he recently announced that he'd become a Democrat. I mean, do you think we see more of that? Do you think we see more ex-Republicans say, I'm registering and I'm on the Democratic side, or is that not going to do it?
Some will, and some are going to head off into the wilderness. I don't know. Now, having said, to express my skepticism about that, I do want to underline that in 2024, I did support Kamala Harris, and I want to give her credit since it's no longer fashionable to say anything nice about the Harris campaign. You notice how defeat has suddenly become an orphan.
Yeah,
She
that's
did
right.
something that Joe Biden did not do. She really did reach out to
Yeah.
never Trump conservatives. She had an event in Wisconsin. I moderated it. Liz Cheney was on the panel, and it was aimed at saying, "You disaffected Republicans, we want you." It was a
Mhm.
very explicit thing. She took some flack for that from some of the talking heads on MSNBC who said, they shouldn't have spent so much time on that. But I give her credit. There was an effort, by the Kamala Harris campaign, and I think that a lot of people that you're talking about, the disaffected Republicans, responded to that. Liz Cheney worked very hard for her. So did Adam Kinzinger. The question is whether you joined the party, and I guess there's something sort of. And look, we're never Trumpers because obviously we have our party loyalty just goes so far. And I guess I have to say that right now there's also this moment where are Democrats going to talk themselves into thinking that, hey, the new Democratic nominee for mayor in New York actually, has some good points when he talks about, I mean, whatever. I don't even want to go off on all of that.
High risk, high risk.
Well, this is one of the things where never Trumpers are committed to opposing Donald Trump, not racing headlong to embrace every single liberal and progressive idea. And if that is the litmus test, then I think you're going to lose some folks. But again, the threat of Trump is so great, and let's come back to this that you and I agree, Democrats agree across the board. The threat of Donald Trump is so great, it is getting worse. We have not hit bottom yet. We are in a constitutional crisis. It will intensify. Every single one of the guardrails that we get counted on to protect the Constitution, I think, are vulnerable. They're much more frail than we thought. And if civil society does not stand up against them, it'll be like watching dominoes. It took Viktor Orban 15 years to destroy opposition in civil society through the media and through universities. Donald Trump has done this, or at least made a significant down payment in the first 6 months. So right now, and I have said this all along, the prime directive is we must stop and block Trumpism, whatever that takes. Any agenda that undermines that or weakens the chance of electing senators and congressmen and governors who will stand up against Donald Trump, I think is very counterproductive.
If you didn't press the heart button as Charlie was saying that, then you made a mistake. Or if you were driving, don't look down at your phone.
Do
But
it later.
you put it so well, Charlie, and I have to say that I don't want to lose sight of your comment about the Harris campaign because it's become so fashionable just to shit on the Harris campaign because they lost. But I have to agree with you. I thought their outreach to the other side, to disaffected conservatives, wasn't just commendable, it was strategically so smart. And they did so well on that. Sure, they didn't end up winning the campaign. There were a lot of factors, and there are in any election campaign, but that was a very, I thought, clever move of them at the time. To your point about Trumpism, you said some words just now that it's going to intensify. maybe you and I can close out today by talking a little bit about that forecast. How should people be thinking about what's coming next? If Trump is really following an authoritarian playbook, what does it look like next? And then by that same token, if we are to look at places that have successfully thwarted takeover attempts of a central government by an authoritarian figure, what lessons does the public take on how to do that successfully?
Well, what does it look like? It looks like you. It starts off with, and I think everything that Donald Trump is doing right now is to acclimate the American public to the abuse of power. If the president of the United States, cloaked with all the majesty of that office, can target an individual like you, then and people go shrug their shoulders and say, well, that's just the way it goes. Then everyone is vulnerable, and he will go from abuse to abuse. If law firms cave in, what will he do? He will be emboldened. Um, he's already put active duty soldiers on the streets of American cities. If you and I would have said that he was going to do that a year ago, or many of the things that he's done, people would have said that we suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. Well, those troops are there. They are still there. And even though we have laws on the books, even though we have a constitution, even though we have a War Powers Act, even though we have the Posse Comitatus Act, he's getting away with it. And every time he does that, again, we become more numb. It becomes more normalized, and he's testing it. I mean, think of like the burglar or the velociraptor who's going from door to door, looking for the ones that are open. So the thing about Donald Trump is that if he is not resisted, he will be emboldened and he will escalate what he is doing. And right now, I think that he is feeling, especially if when he passes this bill, he's going to feel that he is utterly unaccountable. So what might he do? What might Stephen Miller say? Well, you know what, Mr. President, we can do this. Who's going to stop us? Supreme Court's not going to stop us. Congress is not going to stop us. Um, you are not criminally liable under the immunity decision. So we are in a position that the American polity, our American constitutional order has never faced, where whether we're talking about issues of war and peace or the economy or immigration, do you notice how much of it is just simply what Donald Trump's whim wants? Government by whim, an economy by whim. Uh, a stronger word for that is this is dictatorship. That's why I'm wearing the hat. This country has been rejecting kings since 1776. We're about to have the anniversary of that, and yet right now Donald Trump is exercising powers that I think would have made some kings blush, or would have faced much more opposition than he faces right now. So I think we've seen what he's capable of doing, the direction he's going. I think, and I'm sorry to go on for so long, but I think that we've suffered in the past from a lack of imagination. How bad could it be? How aggressive will he be? How vulnerable are we? How many institutions are going to cave in? Um, I think in the last 6 months should have told us, whatever you can imagine is probably going to happen.
Well, I want to key in on TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, that you mentioned, because it's a easy line for a MAGA friend, if you have them, folks, at a cookout over the 4th of July to say, oh, come on, it's Trump derangement syndrome, which implies that your concerns are not founded, that there aren't real consequences to what Trump is doing, that it's all a political game and everything's fine. And, I'm glad you pointed to the situation we're living in, Charlie. It's why my wife and I decided to talk about this more, is to show people if it is a syndrome, the symptoms are very real. And for us, it has meant financial ruin, social isolation, threats against our family. I mean, real stuff. I mean, we are over our head in lawyers, and, life is as hard as it's ever been for us right now because of being added to that blacklist. And I always have to caveat with, I don't say that for anyone to play the violin. I say that because people should know, if he can do that to us, certainly he could do that to you or anyone else. But even more immediately, Trump has been doing that targeting because he wants to scare any internal opposition. That's why people should care. I don't I don't need them to care about Miles Taylor's family if they don't. I need them to care that in bringing the wrecking ball to us, he is sending a signal to anyone in his government that tries to defy unconstitutional orders that if you do that, he will destroy you. And I think so far that's working quite well because those unconstitutional ideas that in a first term had been, some of them, contained within the confines of the administration now are not. They're not being challenged internally. Trump is moving forward with them, and he's moving forward with his revenge campaign. So, I think that's why people should pay attention. To that last question,
Agree
Charlie,
with you.
though, give us a little bit of hope about where we go next. You pointed to the rejecting King's hat. I would say as a quasi, scholar of international relations, you look at some of these authoritarian states and you see that popular mobilization is one of the most effective tools at shining a light first on autocratic behavior and then eventually curtailing that. Are you seeing signs of that here in the United States?
Yes, but I want to go back to your point, which is so important. I want people to understand that this is not just coming from you. I agree with you completely. Fear is the point. You do not have to go after everyone. It's like how many birds do you need to shoot on the wire to get them to all go? You only need one. And so you pick out certain people and you say, this is what's going to happen. He wants people to be afraid. He wants them to lie awake at night. He wants, their partner to say to them, we could lose everything, how terrible it's going to be. Fear is a major part of Trumpism, and I think that's where we have to recognize that if there is not collective action, we will all fail. I mean, it's that famous Benjamin Franklin quote about if we don't hang together, we'll hang separately. Literally true right now. I think many in the legal community recognize that belatedly. I think one of the most shocking things that happened was when you saw those big law firms figure we can get safety by caving in. I think what they're realizing is there is no safety by caving in. You simply embolden them. So if you have universities stick together, if you have if you have the law firms begin to stick together, if the media would stick together, and by the way, can I just parenthetically say, fuck you, CBS and Paramount, if you cut that deal with Donald Trump, just like I would say, fuck you, ABC, for having caved in because you made things more dangerous for everybody else. You intimidated everybody else by surrendering. So I do think that there is that. There's also I guess I was surprised by some of the public opinion polls showing that he's losing altitude on immigration because it turns out the American people actually do care about due process. They are offended by these stories. It's one thing to say, yes, we should crack down on illegal immigrants, but now everyone has these phones and they're taking pictures of these, the masked agents taking mothers and grandmothers and fathers off the street. I think it offends an innate sense of fairness in the American public. So if I have any hope, it's not going to be in the elites. It's not going to be in the leaders in Congress. It's going to be in the American people who finally go, you know what, this doesn't feel like the America that I believe in. And so I think that we need to start talking about, yes, there's an attack on democracy, but I also think that we need to start talking about freedom. This is an assault on freedom. And if there's any value that Americans, I think, hold dearly, it is that. And I think that we need to take back all of those things from MAGA. MAGA does not get to take the flag from us. MAGA does not get to take the concept of freedom from us. MAGA does not get to take the idea that we are defending the Constitution or that we love America. They can't take that from us. So I think that there are ways of pushing back, and you hope there's a turning point. But I certainly am not going to be one of those people that's going to try to sell you some hopium that we're on some sort of a vast winning streak, because right now, we are right in the middle of battle and it could go either way.
I got to tell you, Charlie, I am gripping my pitchfork on this end, and I think you almost crashed the Substack live because people were hearting that so much. I do just want to say, I'm sure that a lot of the folks listening right now and watching follow Charlie, but I wasn't blowing smoke when I said he's really been a moral mentor over the greater part of the past decade, has been extremely clear-eyed about what we are living in, but also what we are going into. So I hope folks continue to follow and share Charlie's insights, because there's a lot of people we all know that need to be listening to Charlie in this moment. So I encourage folks to share Charlie's insights out there. Good sir, I appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah. To the contrary. Thank you so much, Miles. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Charlie. We'll talk soon, and I hope everyone has a safe and happy Independence Day. Thank you for rejecting kings, Charlie, and for leading us to the light. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.